to those joining from Africa and Europe. Good afternoon to those joining from Asia. I want to say thank you for joining today's online event, Innovative Thinking, part of our Knowledge Transfer web series. We are going to get started shortly. Firstly, my name is Elisa King, and I am the Marketing and Communications Manager here at the World Innovations Forum. I just want to go over some quick housekeeping rules. There is no need to take screenshots today as we are recording the webinar, and we will share the presentation with you following the conclusion. Secondly, if you have any questions or issues throughout the webinar, please post them in the GoToWebinar control panel. And if you have any issues, I will address them throughout, and we will have a question session at the end where you can ask your questions. So without further ado, I would like to make an introduction to our speaker. If you have joined us on our previous Knowledge Transfer web series, you know him very well. But if you're new, thank you for joining us, and I will make the introduction. Axel Schulter is our founder and chairman of the World Innovations Forum. He is a highly successful entrepreneur himself who spent most of his life in Silicon Valley and started and exited about 4 companies, one of them IPO'd. He successfully raised almost 20 rounds of funding from VCs, angels, and 4 from crowdfunding. He also helped raise countless funds for funding for startups. So without further ado, I will let him take it away in the presentation on innovative thinking.
All right, thank you so much, Alyssa. Yeah, hello from my side as well. And happy to be back, so to speak, with you guys from, big chunk parts of the world. And what we want to do today is talk about innovative thinking. And innovative thinking is not just me or a few people. We have a great team of innovative thinkers from actually also around the world. They're from many countries in Asia, many countries in Africa, many countries in Europe, the US, and I think sooner or later we will also have people from Latin America and Australia and New Zealand. What you probably noticed, we all noticed that we have to be more digital, and I want to start with that because it looks like from all resources that we can tap into, which is actually quite a lot, and these resources are from all over the world, we will probably live with Corona for many more months. People say this may go into 2025. That was sort of one scenario I heard. Others say, well, by summer 2021, we might be actually able to vaccinate people, to test more, and so on. Yet others say, well, unfortunately, the virus is mutating, and vaccination may not follow all the mutations. So what we thought as World Innovations Forum, we don't want to wait until something happens or not happens and shift further and further. We want to simply continue to work with you, simply helping you, because you, more than anybody else, has to continue to work hard and fast. And when you look into the global industry world, all kinds of industry segments, we see one thing: digital has no problem, non-digital has between some and terrible problems. And both are actually forced to innovate, because innovation has been, and has nothing to do with the virus, innovation has been the key driver for all of us since about 375,000 years to get us out of the caves and into an ever more socialized environment. And so we have to learn online, and we have to work with these higher focus, because online learning needs a little bit more focus than if you're in a classroom. Because in a classroom, you can't do anything else other than sitting there, listening to a teacher or instructor or whatever. You may fiddle around with your cell phone below the desk, but all in all, you're basically forced to be focused in most cases. Now, on your home office, you sit there, I talk, and you may have me on speaker. You walk to the fridge, that I do once in a while too, and coming back and continue to listen and may or may not follow everything and everybody. And that gives me a lot of freedom, but also reduces my ability to focus. And so I think what we want to do over the next couple of weeks and months, working on concepts to help you do way more digital than you do already today. And not because of digital, and not only because of Corona, but actually we believe that this is where the human industry evolution will go to. It is fully digital for so many other reasons. And I say this in advance because whether you follow us or me, this is totally your decision. If you're focused or not focused, it's your decision, which makes it sometimes a little bit harder, but that's what it is. And today we want to talk about innovative thinking. Probably one of the core things we have done as a team in our previous businesses. We started with disruptive business model education in our third accelerator program for the first time in 2016. And in our fifth and sixth, we intensified that, and we gained a lot of insight in how we think innovatively. Because one of the biggest problems is that if somebody asks you, we all didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer, even though I'm known to be an innovative thinker. But what does this mean? Think outside the box. Which box? This box, another box, an emotional box, a visual box. Think big and bold. Yeah, but how? And so we try to find ways to make this innovative thinking process something that is more tangible. We can grab, we can hold on to, we can even build methodologies. And this is what I'm talking about today. And we want to empower more entrepreneurs than ever before to innovate. One thing is very clear. Over the next 10 years, we will see innovations and we will need innovators more than you can imagine today. And the reason is twofold. One, and it has to do again back with Corona. If you see large manufacturing plants with tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees stood still for a while, I mean, the cost of this is just unimaginable in itself. So what would an owner of such a, or even the management team of such an organization would do when they know there might be a next epidemic? And we had epidemics before, hundreds of it. Well, the first thought is, well, we need to increase the degree of automation that we have today in the future. And increasing the innovation, the degree of automation means more machines, smarter machines, better machines, more robots, more AI than ever before, and less people to work on that. And for some, this is called disaster, unemployment rate, losing my jobs. But honestly, if you lose your job, meaning you don't know what to do because nobody's telling you do this and do this every day from morning till night, we have to rethink our whole education model, because we're educated to work for somebody, something, work hard and work every day. We're not creative enough anymore, which we have been for the last basically 5 million years, to stay on our own feet. So all we have to do is become, again, somebody who stands on our own feet, other than somebody else telling us. And innovators are people who do that already. Entrepreneurs, people who do that already and never did. All we needed as entrepreneurs were more and more employees over time. But if that's changing, then we need more innovators, more entrepreneurs, and that would be amazing. Because for one reason, it would basically dilute a little bit our capital across many, many more people, which is a good thing, because we don't need billionaires and trillionaires. Even though if it's possible, we all try to do that. I mean, honestly, if I would say, okay, I want to become a trillionaire or a billionaire or whatever, I would try to do that. And that's what my life was all about. And so what we want to do is empower more entrepreneurs than ever before in becoming innovative. And that is a word for many entrepreneurs. It's always like, almost like a, oh gosh, you know, innovative. I mean, I just want to build a little app. I just want to build a little this, a little that. And I have to tell you the terrible news, you know, a little bit of something is actually nothing on an entrepreneur's level. You cannot survive long term with doing a little bit of something. You can do a little bit of work for somebody, but for yourself and your family and actually make this working for the whole economy, unfortunately not. So we want to help you become innovative because we have been helped as well. But we wanted to understand how this actually works in our mind. How do we come to these crazy ideas? And we try to look for other totally unrelated industries. Actually, we came up with athletes, how they did what they do today. So this is one of these mono ski drivers doing some artistry work. And if you go onto one of the bigger slopes, at least here in Europe or in North America, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of kids doing stuff like that. So this was a mountain climber in the 1950s, and he took 7 to 10 days on average, depending on the weather and energy and so forth, to get up Half Dome, which is one of these big, beautiful rocks, basically, not even a mountain, it's a huge rock in California, 1950s. This is a lady who did this in 2000, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, it sounds unimaginable. Something magically must have happened to get it from 7 days to 2 hours. There's a skier driving down some of the slopes with, you know, the equipment was whatever it was in the 50s. And now look at just the posture, just the balance of this guy on the skis. Obviously, the technology is much better and the equipment is much better in the 2000s. This is one motorbike artist in the 50s, and that was sort of almost the, I mean, like, you know, he's totally ill-minded to do that because this is super dangerous. Well, look at, you know, just 50 years later, this is what people did then. So something must have happened, but how was this transformation possible? That was the question I had. Biological evolution? Well, theoretically, yes, but not in 50 years. So something else must have happened in the past 50 years that completely transformed how athletes use their body compared to the last 375,000 years. And back in the sort of really old world, we had way more need to use our bodies and everything, but we were even rockier than today, the oldest people. So the answer is today, the top athletes know so much more about their body, their energy consumption, their nutritious needs. They can train a single muscle. They know the terrain where they're actually working on, or they're biking or paddling or sailing or running. It just doesn't matter. And obviously they have top equipment and very good trainers. If we see trainers today and compare this with trainers like 50 years ago, day and night in between. So we thought we need to rethink innovation because there is also something that comes and originates from ideas, but we don't know anything compared to these athletes, anything about this idea creation. And so we knew it all starts here. So the source of the idea is the brain. This is something we know. Ideas don't fall from the sky. We can, you know, harvesting from trees. Ideas come from our brain always, but we don't even know how. We don't know when, we don't know why, and we cannot influence it. But the question is, what is the difference between people who continuously innovated, and, you know, one of the lucky ones that built 4 companies, 4 times innovation, 4 times or 3 times actually disruptive business models, and I didn't know where it came from. I wanted to know. So we need to look, I thought, for the center of creativity. Where is it? I mean, we have a speech center, we have the motion center, we have all kinds of centers in our brain, and boom, there is no center of creativity. And we got a very surprising realization. And some of you may have seen my TED Talk. Homo sapiens is not creative at all. We cannot create anything. So that was shocking. And I was initially thinking this is total BS. But I realized that it is absolutely true. And what me as a business person that wants to know everything about the business and everything about everything, I needed to know whether this is really true and how and why that is. And I realized by learning over the past 4 years that these things here, these endpoints of the many neurons, they are actually full of chemicals. And these chemicals decide whether we do something or not. And these chemicals are also created or composed by the inputs we get. If I put my finger on an oven and it's very hot, this is an experience I have. If I see now, not you unfortunately, but just the camera, that's another experience I have. I see this picture. Every of these experiences gets stored in these little pieces of neurons, and to some part, and nobody knows exactly now how, is still stored not in neurons, but in these white matter in our brain. So new ideas are composed from previous impressions because this is everything our brain has. Our brain has not a wire to some divine system that sends us new ideas. It's also not connected to any internet directly that can push through new ideas. It comes from within the brain, and it's the only place where our brain can actually compose new ideas. And so, yes, there is no center of creativity because we are not creative, but there is a center of exchange in our brain, and that actually makes these new connections that creates new ideas. So for instance, if I see a car and think, okay, yeah, this is nice and this is heavy and this is fast and this does whatever it does, and I want to have, you know, lots of stuff transported from point A to point B, I realize that a car may be too small. And way back in time, people thought, if we make parts of the car much bigger and we load it full with stuff and we have still just, you know, somebody driving it and we call it a lorry or a truck, then we have a new type of car and can actually shove a lot of stuff around. But what it took was the problem and the imagination that with what's out there could be a possibility. And the truck can only be developed after the first car was developed. But even the first car was not developed by it was a kind of a genius, but there was nothing new. We had wheels, we had basically the plan wagon, we had the horses in front of the wagon, and instead of the horse, somebody came up with the engine, Carl Benz. And what happened in his brain was an accidental innovation, because he was messing around with a little bit of petroleum, and the petroleum was in a little can, or was it actually even a kind of alcohol? I don't remember exactly. But it was hot, and he had some lighter, and he wanted to know what happened if he turned it on. And obviously, it almost exploded, but it didn't quite explode. It was in this can, and just the explosion in the can moved this wagon forward. He said, wow, if we can, because this was just a drop, if we can do this with more drops continuously, we can run this wagon without horses. And so the car was actually basically invented on an accidental situation. And we had more of these accidental situations in our past lives of 375,000 years of history of innovation. But more and more innovation were actually created in our mind by constructing the idea, seeing this and seeing that, and then constructing the idea. So I was asked once, we built a better lead management system, and everybody was asking basically, we need to get the sales leads, somebody has an inquiry and we have resellers who should follow up. We should get a perfect mechanism to get the perfect lead to the perfect salesperson. But we found out that this is almost never possible because some of the salespeople are busy, others are on vacation and so forth. And I came up with this idea, well, you know what? Instead of giving the leads out, why we don't have them pick it from the website? So the pull mechanism was apostrophe created. And it took a long time because we thought, yeah, well, but this is creative because there was never anything like that until I had to admit, no, you know what, guys, there was one. And this was when this was probably a month or even a year before, I was downloading one of the first manuals from whatever device, I don't remember even, but I could download it from the web. I thought, you know, if we can download, you know, basically manuals, why can we download leads? And so it was a simple composition of download something and give it to something that is somebody that is really eager and hungry to follow up. And so it happened in my mind that somebody who is going to this platform and eager for leads, because this is what the own purpose is, that they would go for leads, and they grab it, and we can even know who it is, and we can, I mean, it percolated very quickly, and we know that the first and the fastest will probably get this lead, and the first and the fastest is also the right character to follow up with a lead. And he only gets new leads if the first one was followed up and reported back as success or not success. And so there were a lot of things that we had to develop in, was it really success, was it too lazy, and so forth and so forth. But over time, it was composed of probably hundreds of little ideas to become a solution that became market leader 5 years later. So there was nothing I had an injection from the outside or a spark, no accident. It was actually a follow-on of experiences I had before. And I can tell you probably for the next 10 hours, examples were exactly the same has happened from friends, from peers, from people I know, or the situations I know. And so it became very clear, A, we are not really creative. It's not, with very few exceptions, accidental. And Hal Benz was one of those accidental innovations. But it's all happening based on past experiences. And the more experience we have, the more we can basically select from or get selected. That's still an open debate. But important to know is that no idea is just randomly. No idea is coming from some divine heavens or anywhere else. It is part of the mechanic of our brain. And if we better understand how this happens and how this comes together and what motivates and what sparks these ideas and how we can actually return sort of the rewards to the brain saying, hey, this was really, really cool. So it knows, okay, it needs to do more of that. Then we can actually create ideas on demand. And that was just phenomenal idea for us. And so the brain is actually the origin for every idea ever created by mankind. And it's probably the same thing. We haven't analyzed it with animals and anything else. So to truly innovate, we realized we need to understand the origin of the ideas in our brain. And that's the only thing where we can start coming up with, how do we actually create ideas? I mean, you can sit down and say, let me think. And what you do there is already a pretty good process, because you think through lots of things. Sometimes you sit there and have just no idea at all. And you sit there and don't even know what to think and where to think. You sit there and think, okay, so I need to create whatever, a new lamp, because all these lamps didn't work for whatever situation. And you think of lamp. How does this lamp look like? How does that lamp look like? Lamp, how can I do it better? And you cannot come up to anything. But here happens something that is already critical. You primed your brain that it should help you get from somewhere in this apparatus some ideas. Even if you don't get anything out of it, it's already a good process. And so after we try to look for, this is where we started, how other people do it, we realized everybody goes through the same thing. Like I just said, what could we do? And sometimes people come immediately with a solution. They think, how did you come up with this? Because the origin of this combination of solution was pretty closely in their brain. And so we realized that when we come up with or talking with peers and friends, we could not get any further because all that comes back was sort of very obvious things. Yeah, but you know, this is lame, or oh, they do this already, but it's still not good. And the brain has something that we need to understand. It fires obvious solutions, rightfully, by the way, very, very quickly. It's one of the things where this machine is absolutely superior. But also the right and quick ideas are the obvious ideas. And obvious because we think, yeah, this is actually very logical. I should have thought the same thing because it's obvious. But if it's obvious for you and obvious for one of your friends and maybe some other colleagues, it's also most likely obvious for the rest of the world. So we can say these idea sparks are not innovative. So somehow we need to get deeper and understand more how this actually happens. So for us, the major shift in understanding our mind was when we realized, when we talked to neuroscientists, that they have a very different understanding of how it works, why it works, and they can tell you, no, there's a logical process. I mean, if you stick a needle through your heart, the heart is irritated, it doesn't pump anymore, and when it doesn't pump anymore, within minutes or maybe, I mean, maximum minutes, you're dead. Very logical. When you stick the needle only through one of the parts of it, but not through the chamber, well, then it does something, but it's different. And so the brain is no different than any other of our organs. It's a very logical machine. So we realized that with the fact that we are not creative and we cannot create any single thing, and new ideas don't happen randomly, that there must be a logical mechanism to come to ideas. And that was actually after the first frustration of not being creative. This was a wow. I mean, if this is the case, then we will find ways to actually stimulate our brain like we stimulate muscles and we stimulate, face movement and we stimulate air movement, which comes into voice, anything. We thought, okay, even if this is not happening for the next 2 to 3 years, well, we're on the right path. And I believe we were. So every idea is composed from billions actually of experiences. That is something that we know from the neuroscience world. And there are various key activities that are basically responsible in our brain for this ideation process, which is a term that we use in the management arena, ideation, the process of creating ideas without even knowing how it worked. But we're so close now that we can say, okay, we have a very new way of ideation, because ideation is a stimuli in the brain, and the stimulus comes from all kinds of different situations. And I can tell you one thing up front, the brain stimulation for ideas is on the lowest level, no stimulation at all other than new inputs. And as long as we have our eyes open and our ears open, then the brain gets this information. And every piece of information, every millisecond, new information coming in is stimulating our brain to make association with existing combinations. And if there is an existing combination, it puts it on that part. So then the neural endpoint will get an information that, hey, this is the same as is. So this is the doing business as usual. If it's something very new, it looks for analogies, what happened similarly, and then, okay, it comes in. And then if it's a new idea, or a new situation, then there is different different types of intensity of the process. If it's life-threatening, you can imagine, then the brain is on full alert, and sometimes the brain is so alerted that you cannot move, you freeze, because the brain takes all the energy, but at the same time, in order to basically calculate, almost like a computer, any permutation of these ideas, it doesn't want you to move. And it also came up with this concept of freeze, because it's typically when you're, go 100,000 years back in time, if there is a threat from an animal that can, beat you or eat you or whatever, the best way to do is just freeze. So there's a lot of logic behind all those. And today we still have the freeze or the shock moment, even though there's no animal eating us, but it's still because the brain needs all the energy to actually think through stuff. Because the brain automatically creates new ideas, meaning compositions of everything the brain knows, so to speak, goes into this idea building process. So you drive and you see, okay, there's a car coming in front of you. The first millisecond or 2 milliseconds or seconds, actually, sometimes you can't do anything. This is shock moments. And this is bad, but the brain is fast enough to then go back immediately and then indicates, take a right or take a left, hit the brake. I mean, all this. But there is a moment in time where you don't do anything. And that moment in time is when it consumes everything. And so we know that between you see something regularly, I see outdoor, the same pictures every day, it is still a stimuli for the brain, or something that is life-threatening. And so we thought, okay, everything in between is a scale. And so maybe we need to look at what stimulates the brain to do more than just absorbing the idea, without getting a brain freeze and do nothing anymore, and it just goes wild. And we realize in these various steps, the brain does actually various things. So, and I trust me, I don't want to make you a brain surgeon or a neuroscientist, but like the athletes, if we don't know how this works, and we did not know, and therefore the rest of the world, all of us, even the smartest, biggest enterprises, could not innovate because nobody knew how it works. So we were all waiting for accidental ideas, because this is the only thing where it said, okay, yeah, maybe we have this idea, but it doesn't work that way. That's something we realized. So if we look into this idea composition process, really simplified, then any external stimulation or internal rearrangement, and there's the reason for, may kick off a new idea. And we realized that the internal rearrangement is actually one thing that is critical for us, because it rearranges neural connections, so-called neural pathways. And the only reason it does it is when we're thinking about something new. So we know, okay, that process is one of the processes, and it happened, for instance, in the dream always. So we have this always in a dream, it rearranges. And if you just look around, it may or may not. If you totally relax and look around, enjoy life, it may start to rearrange. And so there's one thing that we also realized: under pressure, it's not as good as if you're totally relaxed. But we also realized in a life-threatening pressure, it's way more than in a relaxing statement. So we cannot say, oh, under pressure, you cannot innovate. Yes, you can, and you can very well. And we can also not say, well, if you're super relaxed, you're innovating better than if you're under pressure. We cannot say that also. But we know that there are connections between these two. And so we need to find situations or create situations where your innovation flow gets actually activated. So new innovations from the past, the more the better. We also learned neurons connect and disconnect. So these guys here connect with each other and disconnect with each other. And these disconnections or neural pathways between two of these organelles, this is the core of these neurons, they do this based on needs. And if you know you need to invent something or create something because it's part of your job as an innovator or as an entrepreneur, you need to be more innovative than you are by just copying something and trying to sell it cheap. Because you know, if you're innovative, you have, first of all, a huge market versus a small market. You get way more margin instead of a shitty margin, excuse my language, and you get way more brand awareness than if you don't. So the difference between I make a copy of XYZ and sell it cheap versus I fire up my brain and make it innovative, and even it can be a little bit more expensive and become an Apple or a Samsung or any of the big guys versus just, grabbing on the floor and, selling cheap to, my environment here. Then you will need and want to become innovative. And now, since you get the idea how it works, so let's continue. So neurons connect and disconnect with others. And the intensity of the connection based on urgency, again, there's a danger, or, hey, this is something that really interests me. And if something interests you and you get deeper and deeper and you begin to understand, you get excited. And that is one of these internal rearrangements. If you get excited, you will go, wow, this is so cool. Oh, I need to do more. And if you have this intriguing, motivational feeling, that is brain food, literally. This is what the brain likes because it gets different nutrition into its organelles, and they're hungry for that. That's basically chocolate for the brain. And if you can provide chocolate for the brain, then it helps you find more of these composing ideas. And so we know that we can stimulate innovative ideas. We call this learning on the one side, or innovation on the other side. And between learning and innovation is actually no difference in regards of the mechanism in the brain. So if you learn to walk, well, you probably don't remember. I don't remember really, but everybody tells me that's one of the most exciting parts because you all of a sudden be on your own. And this drives humans more than most other excitements later on. But if you're a skier or a swimmer or diver or whatever sports you do, and you get really good, this makes you feel so cool because that's the food for the brain. And the brain is the one that says, yeah, give me more, and helps you, your movement, helps everything you do to get better. And this is learning. And there's no difference to innovation. Yeah, I have this idea and I can do this and we can do that. And if we combine this and think of if we can do that, how cool is that? So between learning and innovation, it's almost no difference. The outcome is a little bit different because now you innovate for others versus for yourself in learning. And if you realize the moment that your innovation is something very, very positive for others, then you get even more excited. And this is why rich people are not the greedy ones that many people think. They get actually so excited about helping thousands of people. Obviously, they see the dollars in the background saying, gosh, I mean, just imagine the revenue is coming on. But the motive to drive it is making more people excited about the product versus just randomly selling something to make money. And so between learning and innovation is learning is for yourself and innovation is for others. And if others get excited, that plays back into your brain. And I mean, I've wrote this many times. I get excited when I can help a company thrive with whatever I sold. I have to say that. And so when we begin to associate innovation with learning, then we can actually work on a process that we know, because we kind of know how we felt when we learned. And I'm in a super example for not excited about learning. For the longest time, when I was a kid. I was bad at school. I didn't like to learn things that I'm not interested in. And I was a terrible learner. And I was, breaking up at one point and did my own thing, and then started to get excited about things I really want to do. And already Confucius said that, gosh, 1,600 years ago. So if you do something that you wholeheartedly love, you will never work a day in your life. And I thought, yeah, this is my man. I want to do that. And I actually did. I never worked. I was always super excited. Still today, what we found out and what we do here excites me. And this is the brain food that makes me even want more and go deeper and go wider and go farther. And helping now others like you and many others to get innovative and experience the same thing makes me even more excited. So I do even more of that. So learning equals to innovation. Learning, we know a little. We also know that some people are learned very easy, so that's good. Other people learn almost very, very bad. That's good too, because they learn only for themselves. But for themselves, meaning actually more for the rest, because there is more to do than for just for me. And when you create ideas, then the whole composition of new ideas in past experiences has something interesting, because it creates new ideas based on ideas. So if you come on the idea, if I do this and that, I can weave a fabric in a whole new way. And you keep that in mind. And you say, well, if I can weave a fabric in a whole new way, I could possibly also do this and that on top of this fabric that never worked on general fabric. So you have basically two steps of innovation. You then innovated something that even doesn't exist at this very moment. But on top of this, you innovate more, assuming that this would work. And this gets you to amazing ideas. And if you think about that, depends on which research you look, between 375,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, the spear was invented. Homos, our pre ancestors, they were throwing stones at animal until they get so much hurt that they can finally get them down. But then somebody came on the idea and take a spear with a very sharp needle in front, gets into the animal, and so they could hunt much better. It took 300,000 more years until they actually came to the idea to make a bow and a leather line, and an arrow is a smaller spear but goes much faster with much more power. And then it took another couple of years to do something else and so forth. Eventually, we had the same mechanism. Sort of looks like a spear, and we take the spear to Mars or to Moon. Now, whoever created the spear couldn't create the rocket to Mars at the same time, because there were so many steps in between that was not possible. But a few steps is possible. And now you already imagine probably, well, when we have a solution that is exciting, don't stop. Continue to work on this evolutionary process that we later on call the innovation tree, but to think of the next, what can you do more with that? And you get much further, and this is an innovation. It will be extremely hard to copy from somebody else, because the intermediate steps, well, I do the fabric this way. Well, if I have a fabric this way, then I could do that. And with that, I could actually create this. That is something people cannot copy. They cannot follow a mind process that is in your brain. It is not in theirs. And possibly even the base innovation, so to speak, is not in their brain because they don't have the experience. But the experience that you have combining things to something new and then yet another time to something new, almost impossible to do. So our ability to abstract and construct allows us to create an imagination of things that has never been possible and never been existent before. So our large repository of experiences is basically the pathway to groundbreaking innovation. And since we don't create anything new because we are not creative and only compose. So one tip I can tell you is grab as many experiences as you can. If you see something odd, wow, look at it and get interested for it. Be curious. Why is it? What does it? And even if you say, I don't care, well, then you may not care. But if it's kind of interesting, well, then dive into it. And that is one of the bigger differences between some of the better innovators or some of those who have a harder time to innovate. If there's something curious and you want to know, then follow your instincts to get to know that. And everything you get to know about a certain situation feeds your experience repository that you may need in 50 years from now. It may be that long, but who cares? There's enough room up there to store these things. And if you don't use it at all in no other circumstances, then it will vanish away anyway. And so you'll make room for new things. But all this was for us the beginning for what we called neuro ideation. So I give you another quick walkthrough deeper into the brain right now. And again, I don't want to make you a neuroscientist, but it's good to know sort of on average how it works. So we have our brain here, and these are our neurons. Go through our body, we have 86 billion of them. So, and if you look at these neurons and what's happening here, this is between one of the endpoints. This is a synapses, and this goes into another neuron or into another segment of our brain. And here is our organelle. This is the actually core of the neuron. This is the real computer. Imagine you have a little bit of an IoT device in your brain, but you have 86 billion IoT devices in your brain. And if you realize that power, you will for a long time not think anymore, is AI killing us? Because we don't even have enough computers right now on the planet to actually meet one single brain. So we have an enormous computing power, and this computing power goes far beyond everything we have built ever in our lives. Because these endpoints here, as I said, the organelles, if you look at it, what kind of devices there are, obviously this is our nano and sometimes even pico size. They're all like little computers, and they don't need the fat and build lines that our chips need. Relatively speaking, a microchip, any microchip, is I mean, it's horrendous how fat and how plumb, I mean, how to say that, how basic it is compared to what we have there. But we need to understand that this thing is way more than digital 0 and 1. Everything here goes analog. When a transmission happens between here and here, and then happens within sometimes millisecond, nanosecond, whatever, there is a whole slew of information going from one to the other. The degree of and the granularity of the chemicals that are going from point A to point B is way beyond what we have, 8, 16, 32, 64-bit processors simultaneously. It's all peanuts. In the brain, there is one thing in the between here. This is the corpus callosum with A. So not collos, that's a callosum. And it connects these two brain halves. And we have people on Earth, they are coming without a corpus callosum or damaged. They have serious problems. One of the biggest problems is their lack of creativity. Because this massive organization here, 200 million neurons going just between these two halves, will organize information from one to the next, to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. And it does this with an unbelievable speed. And as you can see, it's organized in a way so fine and so perfect in the brain that it's built for speed, for energy reduction, and still the brain is the most energy consuming organ in our body. Now, if we have ideas from here to here, then, and we could have the craziest ideas in the world. So if you see a tiger and you're in the woods and you want to go away, I mean, and either you run and you know, okay, this guy's outrunning you, is killing you just because you run, so you better stay. But you could have the idea, well, how about here's a tree, but instead of climbing up, this is too much work. How about a rocket comes down in this very second, and I jump on the rocket and fly to the moon and look at what is going on, and then I come back. This is a ridiculous idea. This idea could happen in our brain, but not in this super sense of urgency situation. And therefore, everything that is impossible or illogical or takes too long or is not comprehensible for the brain will be wiped out. And this is why the corpus callosum is such a critical thing for us. Because when we want to innovate, we don't need the innovation within the next seconds, because we need to go away from this tiger and actually jump up the tree and can calculate that we're faster on the tree top than the tiger is following us. And so we will probably go up the tree if it's far away, if it's not too close where the tiger stands. The corpus callosum tries to make a solution very, very fast, and it does. And you know, we're talking about, oh, you have this brain spark instantaneously. What a cool idea. Now, as I said earlier, these are these ideas that are obvious, and they're not really helpful for us. So we need ideas that are fast, theoretically, but they are unusual. They go much further than anything else before. And that is when the corpus callosum knows there is no danger. So remember, danger on the one side, totally relaxed on the other side, anything in between. And so the more we know about when do we do what and when the brain does what, the more we can navigate and stimulate our brain. If we have the instant idea, which is actually not bad, then the brain works on this idea. If we tell them, not good, it says, oh, so I don't get my endorphins, which is my chocolate, you know, the chemicals that are running here. Well, it goes back. And if the brain realizes that the same idea to think through or that the same need comes back and back and back, it starts building a neural pathway, which takes, hold on, a full minute or 2 or 3 to actually build it. So this is anything but an emergency call. And if it does that, it finds new connections. And therefore, a brainstorm meeting that goes an hour gets somewhere, but actually nowhere. But if you come back, and if you have been on brainstorm meetings, you come up with new ideas a couple hours later, maybe a day later, and everybody's telling you, come on, we had this meeting, we agreed we go with this, so stop it, let's go with that. And that is the killer for every single innovative idea. And this is why neuro ideation runs completely different. We need the time, not we because we're stupid, not we because we're so intelligent. The brain needs the idea to understand, okay, not an emergency. I still don't get my rewards from this idea that I compiled. My master, me, you, are still not really happy. So it starts building new connections. And if you do this over a couple days, the brain actually starts nightly processes to do them more and more. And this is why there's a saying, some people, you know, what is it? Some people are getting it in the sleep or overnight, and that's absolutely and 100% true. And if I'm thinking about processes, doing something new, I know that it's happening. I know I let this sit down. I know it come back. I know I still have another day, another night, another day, another night. And funny enough, all the peers I ask are the same thing. You know, I woke up this one morning and I just had the complete solution. And they'll say, hey, you know, me too. And I said, you know, me too. So we know that the brain is actually working that way. Now, a neuroscientist may say, oh, actually, this is all not proven yet. This is all, I mean, just speculation. Yes, it is. But it is proven in a way that everybody we know has the same behavior. And we're not interested, is the organelle shooting this chemical or that chemical? We're interested in the behavior. We're interested in the outcome. So not stressing time too much, there are a couple things neuro ideation does. We start with the market needs and dreams based on an ideation process. So we want to get the needs and dreams from the market, meaning our customers. That's something every entrepreneur does. Funny enough, none of the enterprises do. We're going far beyond brainstorming. We go back and again and again and again. Startups do that. Enterprises don't. Then some look for analogous experiences like, okay, well, how did these guys do that? Maybe it has nothing to do with our problem. Maybe we want to build a new plastic cup, and we wonder how people actually build stones from clay for whatever reason. Somebody says, well, you know, we had the same vases. They're similar to our. How did they do that? Then brain stimulating for openness, removing an energy blockage, every deeper going into the ideation session, you know, another day, another week, maybe yet another week. You don't find this in enterprises, but if we, I mean, very motivated, depending, you know, very, I said, energy full entrepreneurs who want to create the solution and don't give up until they have it. Well, that's not enterprise play. Enterprise play is, well, okay, you have the time to consider this. Now you have this. Let's start with that. So what I'm showing with this list is that the startups are always ahead of the enterprises. Therefore, never, at least so far, never be afraid of an enterprise. Always startups outperform enterprises. Now, enterprises will learn about this methodology too, but still the small group of driven entrepreneurs will probably be faster. So I can sum it up by saying we are composed of things, and so are our ideas. Ideas are not magic, they're not accidental, they're not coming out of nowhere. They are based on previous experiences, and we build and compose new ideas and more constructs of an idea based on matter, on material. There's two amazing discoveries that comes out of this. If we're not creative, whenever we can imagine something that was composed from already existing situations, we can make it. There is no reason that, oh, this is impossible. No, it is actually possible. The other way around, it cannot be impossible, because everything we had to compose this idea was already existing. There is one situation where it's not existing, is we compose an idea, and out of that we compose a new idea, and yet another one, and then we tell others, and they don't have that trace, well, they cannot follow. But it doesn't mean that's impossible. I mean, if somebody thought, okay, I throw this spear and I want to fly to the moon. It was not possible to throw the spear to the moon back then. But today, as we all know, we landed there and on Mars, and we had a Voyager actually exceeding our solar system, and we know it can fly based on the trajectory for probably 3 billion years. I mean, for us, inimaginable, incomprehensible what that actually means. But we already did that. It's not a dream. We already did that. We cannot prove that it will fly 3 million years or billion years, because it may crash with an asteroid or something. But it could. We know that. We can comprehend, based on our math capabilities, that this is possible. So everything that we can imagine, we can make sooner or later. Sometimes not immediately. We need some intermediate steps, but probably within our lifetime. A second thing is even more intriguing. Everybody, every human being can create amazing ideas and can be innovative. And if we would not have the education system that we have, and even worse, that we're bringing now, we Europeans and Americans and so on, into all the other countries, we would not kill as much as creativity as we do. And not that education is bad, no, don't take me wrong, it's very important. but the way it's applied, that learn and repeat and learn and repeat and learn and repeat, if that is everything and creativity or composition of new ideas is nothing, then we are on the wrong track. Everybody can. So we talked about analogy. This is a chip, 6.9 billion transistors. Nobody on earth has the comprehension span to fully understand every aspect of this chip. The people who know part of it, they know how to build it, how to break it, how to do this and how to program it and so forth. But there is not a single human being who knows everything about this chip. Interesting? Same with our brain. But what we know is that this 6.9 billion transistors in our smartphone can calculate, can give us dates, can give us all kinds of information. And all this inside here is what we need to know. We don't need to know this chip at all, but we need to know the behavior. But that there is a chip and there is software that programs it, gives us the indication what it may do in the next step. And that is why we need to better and better understand the brain, because this is where our ideas, basically our network, our calculator, our dates and everything is composed. So getting ready to groundbreaking innovation means learning a little bit more about how the brain does things and to get methodical. Because we're still not, even despite everything I said, you may say, okay, so where do I start here? How do I think this or that? You know it's possible, but what we needed to do, and that took us basically another year in our research work, how to do this in a methodical way from, this step and this step and this step. And there is an early approach. It's called design thinking. You heard of it, I guess. There starts with empathy, that you get to know, basically the audience and what their problems are and so on. And then you define the problem that you want to solve. And then the ideation process, which is basically brainstorming. And now we know why design thinking hasn't gotten to this major breakthrough, because the ideation based on brainstorming does not get you any innovative idea, not a single one, and under no circumstances. Not only accidentally not or accidentally yes, no, it cannot. Because now we know that brainstorming gets us the obvious, the fast information, but not the deep, the unlogical, the wide-ranging information or ideation that we actually want to become innovative. And then there's a prototyping and test. So we know that this was a super start. And I was actually using design thinking myself. It wasn't bad, absolutely not. It was the best we had. But one thing threw me off when I realized that the ideation process doesn't help me at all. Because brainstorming, I know, and I also know the outcome was never really innovative. It was exciting to do it and to hear all the stuff, and we were thinking, and we had lots of fun, but there was no innovative outcome. And so the complete ideation innovation management system structure all of a sudden became 10 steps, and very different ones and similar ones. So the ideas and the needs and dreams is similar to the first 2 steps of the design thinking model combined. But we also realized if we just take people and just have fun with in an ideation session, that is not working. We need very, very specific team members to do that. And even if we have them, because ideation can go so wild, we need to get some guidance, and this is the innovation strategy for a particular structure. And so we will go through all of that in our next session. But for now, let me just finish the first part, so to speak. The innovative thinking part is we can stimulate in a way, but very carefully say that in a way, control our brain and control the process of ideation. And what we try to do is helping entrepreneurs to make that happening. So we're looking for entrepreneurs in a way that we know that this gang, I mean, I like this kind of casual, they all look like gangsters more or less. That group of really crazy people was our Flight 8 in Vietnam, and build basically innovation in a program which is including the deep innovation design classes and knowledge transfer webinars like we do, and global mentorship and so forth. So this is part of, and today's session and also the next session next month is sort of really at the core of the World Innovations Forum, because innovation is in our name and it's the core. And deep innovation design, that new process, we will do next in the next session, session number 5, September 8th, and then we go on with other topics that are entrepreneurs relevant. But I don't want to stop without telling you a little bit more, which we haven't really formulated too well in the past. And this is how we actually want to help members of our World Innovations Forum, entrepreneurs, you, to work. So if you want to transition from a simple copycat, I mean, just copying and selling it cheap, which you can do always, you don't need us. But if you want to transition into real innovative businesses and turn this into an innovative company, then this is where we can assist you. And this is tomorrow, this is in 5 years from now, it just doesn't matter. If you can get traction in the market, I mean, real traction, we can help at least spread the word. And we is not we, me, or World Innovations Forum founders. I mean, obviously we too, but it's the whole group. And we don't honestly even know exactly, but we're including all our meetup groups. I think we're over the 10,000 members. So there is a lot of people who could help you. And if you need more revenue, there is no problem for us to introduce you to certain markets in certain countries or certain industry segments. There might be a situation that none of us know anybody in your specific industry. So this is not guaranteed. But if you're in the IT space or in the food space or in life science or biotech or any of the classic industry segments, we probably have somebody who can help you. If you need an investor, I mean, we currently have a pool of roughly 600 investors. I think the total is even heading towards 900 right now. But there are people who are interested in investing into very cool companies. And so what we do is we assist you in making your company investable, because, oh, I need money, give me an investor. I can tell you it does not work that way. An investor wants to have a certain company in a certain space, which is very intriguing and has already something very powerful. And you may say, well, then I don't need an investor if I'm already very powerful. And this is something where we help you learn that, yes, you do. You need something very powerful, and you don't need an investor to get there. But that path is something where we probably can help too. If you have any problem, any challenge, you know, it's actually not very difficult to reach out to us and say, hey, you know, can you help me with this? And the best way is just send any of us an email. Hey, I need some help. This is my challenge. Can you help me? I mean, I'm probably answering between 5 and 10 questions on Quora almost every day. Not quite, but almost. So I'm here to help, and these people are not even members. So, you know, I think this gives you the best idea. All you have to do is become a member and ask, and then we'll sit down and find help within this organization wherever we can, and that's pretty easy. And it comes with a responsibility. When you are successful and basically sit where I sit right now, then you will need, and this is what we're asking, this is where there's not even a contract, but this is your obligation. You will need help others and step on the shoulders of those who helped you. And I myself couldn't be where I am without helping of others. And all what I did once is give a promise that we give this further. And so we have only 0.007% of successful entrepreneurs in our world. So the group is very small. And but there is a responsibility for helping the next generation and the next. That's all we ask you to. Okay, so what's next on our horizon? Online is the new normal. So we will work on ways to help you leverage online beyond what you do today. Not to make you online savvy, no, because we need to do this in order to make you connected to the world, and the media is online. It's like, okay, you don't like to fly, you will still fly because you have to. Well, now you wouldn't have to. But if you don't like online, well, you still need to do that because it's the only way to reach a large number of audience. The World Innovations Forum is basically carry on the Silicon Valley spirit to online. If you go to our homepage, the first blog that is pretty new there is telling you there is no second, and there will not be a second Silicon Valley ever. But there has also no second Alexandria, which was basically the hotspot in the world, 2,000 years ago. So what we're doing is trying to take actually a next step, and it's not in the next step after Alexandria or Silicon Valley, but the logical next step. We need to get online, all of us. And if we do, we can connect the world together in an online hemisphere. We only need to learn how to communicate through basically our screen. And some people say, oh, this is terrible. I know, but flying for some people is terrible. Driving a car is terrible. Doing people's favor is terrible. If it's not for you, then that's not a big deal. You only need to understand, maybe I should do something else and having more fun. What you should have is fun. That's the overarching thing. Join the community if you go to wiforum.org/win or to wiforum.org/join. It's probably the better link. Then you can join us. We continue with local meetups, and we still will work with the ambassadors to push us actually to join you on your meetup and not on our meetup. I mean, we want to make it local, but that needs to be driven locally. And everybody will learn collaborating online. We started in 2008, so this is 12 years ago. Large-scale projects for large-scale corporations like Lindt Chocolate. I don't even know the names anymore, but this is the one that just popped up. I think there was one big one for a car manufacturer, for others. And we worked with people that we actually never met. We still work with some of these people and still haven't met in person at all. But there is one person, Des Welch, lives in Australia. I probably know him better than some of my very old friends because he is very visible online. He does everything online. And so we know each other. And there's something that's called digital body language and digital sensitivity and so forth. We sense, he's up to speed or he's just down. I mean, we sense this by the way he communicates, by the way he writes or not writes at all. And so there is something to learn, and we want you to learn this too if you want to deal with the rest of the world. Okay, thank you so much. I know I have, I think, 15 minutes overtime, so I'll give it back to Alyssa to see if there's any questions. Then we're happy to answer it. Make it.
Yes, thank you, Axel, very much for that very informative presentation. I know it was very educational on the neurological side. And we do have a couple of questions that come in. We have about 15 minutes, so I'll ask them. But if you have any, please let us know. And there's one that just came in, and as you quickly addressed it briefly, Simon has asked, where can I apply for the membership?
Oh, okay. That's actually pretty easy. Maybe we should make it more obvious. Excuse me. When you go to the website wiforum.org, you find get engaged or something like that, and there is a membership button below that. And for anybody from emerging countries is $25 per year. So we thought we want to make a little bit of contribution to the organization, but little enough for you that it's not really hurting. I mean, every dollar hurts, no question. Particularly if you're starting a startup, I mean, every dollar counts. But we felt it is okay to ask for a tiny contribution so that we also realize if it's not worth doing it, then we do something wrong. And if it's free, we never know, because you would, since it's free, you always appreciate what we do. But if you say, well, but I paid money for it, so then I have a little bit of right to understand more what you actually do and how you can help me. And so we want to keep it that way.
Perfect. Yeah, it's get involved. So it's under that tab. In regards to your presentation, we have a question from Anthony out of Kenya. He says, with innovation comes collaboration. How do you find the right collaborators who can spark innovative thinking?
Okay, very good question. So what we have not done yet, but we're actually working on it, is a version of entrepreneurs' traits. So on our blog, worldinnovationsforum.org/blog, you find on the blog sort of homepage, so to speak, on the right column, sort of in the middle of the most read posts, you see one post, and this is 10 most important traits of an entrepreneur. And if you want another entrepreneur be part of this, which is probably a good idea, then you simply look for people that match these traits, which is like fearless, very engaged. It's also creative. It's innovative. It's people who are very determined. I mean, people who have experience. It's probably not on this list, but you will see it almost between the lines. If people did a lot of things and are interested in a lot of things, instead of experience, we have curiosity as one of the traits. And if you find people who are where you say, okay, yeah, they have all that, then you will actually find an entrepreneurial character. And that person may not even know he is a perfect entrepreneur, but typically it is the case. And there are 3 elements, and I think there is an asterisk somewhere. If they don't have this like independency, and I think even don't remember the other one, then this is still okay. But we will create out of this list a shorter list for innovative minds that will also help us to find those people.
Perfect, thanks. I actually put the link to the blog post in the chat box so people can grab it if they have a chance. It's the 10 most relevant founders traits. That's the title of the blog post.
Oh, cool.
Our next question comes from Nicholas out of Uganda. He wants to know, how can you train your brain to build more neurological pathways? Are there simple exercises that I can do every day to continue training?
Okay, that is a very good question. It's a very loaded question, I have to say, because under neuroscientists, there is a lot of debate about, quote unquote, training the brain to create neural pathways. Because the real answer is still unknown. The brain does certain things so intense, so fast, and so complex that we simply don't know everything yet. And there are people who say you can train your brain by simply trying to get new experiences, sort of what I said earlier. If you're curious about something, learn as much as possible about that something, make it as fast as possible, move on to something new. And if you go back to this, what intrigued you, and continuously learn, and remember I said learning and innovation is very close. Actually, the brain creates over time neural pathways. But there is, I mean, let's back up. There are people who say, okay, here are the things to learn how to train, your brain to create neural pathways. Others say you cannot train by daily routine to get neural pathways, and you should not. The should not is because you would train the brain in something for training purposes to create actually something important, neural pathways. And neural pathways is decided by the brain, and we should probably let it there. It's decided by the brain to decide, okay, yes, this is something we will need more and more and more. We had it already often, and therefore, yeah, we should do that. Brushing your teeth every morning at the same time would be one of those things where you can train your brain with neural pathways. And it's actually done that way. And, I cannot get up really happy in the morning before I had brushed my teeth. I have to do this. So it must be a neural pathway. Others say, oh, I don't tell everybody, but, I'm usually not doing it. Even this might be one. But I think we need to be, we need to be cautious about doing something for training purposes, because we still don't know too much about all the various facts of the brain. And if we train something over and over and over, and then obviously becomes a habit, you can say, okay, I want to get up every morning at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or whatever, and you can train the brain to do that, and it creates neural pathways. But here's the downside of it. If you continue to do this in order to maintain that neural pathway, it's a connection that goes stronger and stronger and stronger. And the stronger the neural pathway connection is, the harder it gets to disconnect. And this is when you learn about the so-called plasticity of our neural system. And I don't want to go too deep into that, but the plasticity is actually the flexibility of connection and disconnection. And the higher the plasticity, the better and the more flexible and the more agile our brain gets. So therefore, there is not really a good reason to carve out pathways just for, can I do that? But there may be no reason to not do it, because if you want to purposely disconnect and say, no, I stop, now I stop brushing my teeth every morning because I want to tell my brain to release that neural pathway, it probably works too. But I'm saying this because we are extremely cautious about messing around with the brain. So we're definitely would never ever try any kind of, not even drugs, but any kind of other brain food. If you eat that or that, I mean, yeah, chocolate is one of the good things for the brain, but we don't know yet, is chocolate already a reward for making it lazy? That can be too. So my answer is, be careful with messing around, and there are different sort of groups out there. People say do this and do it every day, and then you see it works. Yeah, it will work, but the question is, what's the purpose? And then other people say, well, you can do this, but it doesn't matter. You have 86 billion. If there are a couple trained, it doesn't give you anything. So, and since I'm not a neuroscientist and don't want to become, no, I don't want to become one. I have to say that. It's cool enough what I know, and it's cool enough that I learn more. But one of the things, the further you dive into, the more shaded you get, and being wide open. So I want to know what I know and want to know more, but I don't want to be a specialist in this case. And so therefore I cannot really give you a solid, scientifically proven answer for the question. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. We will have one last question. We have a question from Grace from Vietnam. She wants to know, you discussed a little bit about innovative thinking and brainstorming sessions with teams, for instance. How do you spread that out? Because like you said, over during the night, your brain normally thinks of something new. Mm-hmm. So how would you space out brainstorming sessions for teams?
Yeah, so you will actually learn this in the next session, but I can tell you right away. So what we saw working well with the teams we worked so far, and it's not hundreds of teams. I mean, we had a couple large teams. The biggest was 600 managers. Another one was 25 executives. We worked with smaller teams. In our own companies, we always worked with teams of 5 to 6 to 10. Also the startups, we worked with teams of 3 to 4 to 5. And we saw good results when we start, let's say on a Monday with brainstorming and warm up the brain and let the brain know. I mean, even though it sounds really funny and bizarre, but let the brain know there's more to come. And on the next day, we start to get with analogous training. So we look for similar situations in very disconnected areas. So like I said earlier, somebody works on a plastic cap and wants to do something with plastic. Pots made out of clay, very different of the material, the process. The only combination, the only similarity is you can fill it both with water. And so we're looking for these analogies, but very disconnected. And this helps the brain to remember, okay, we talked about this yesterday, but now I'm supposed to look for something very different. And it does it. And if the brain gets stuck because I can't come up with something, well, then go to the internet and let the internet help you. It actually is totally legit. There's no rule what you can and cannot do. And the brain is not the only thing that does stuff, so use tools. And once you find and discuss with others, and even if you couldn't come up with anything and had no, let's say, no connection to the internet, then it sparks ideas in your mind from what the others have to tell and what they found out and so on. And the brain still starts to look for things. And if you enter the third day, and you may have 1 or 2 days in between or not, doesn't, at least right now, I would say it doesn't matter. Then you will wake up, most likely, actually, this is one of the fancy parts, you will wake up the next morning at one day and you wake up with a couple ideas around that topic. Whether the ideas are valuable or not really doesn't matter. The fact that the brain continues to work overnight and tells you next morning, hey, how about this, is a fascinating experience in itself. And then you go, or we go to what we call the column burst. This is when the neural pathways between the two brain halves in the corpus callosum, and we call the corpus callosum simply column. That's actually, by the way, why the company that does that is called Blue Column. With a column burst, after 5 days, that's typically where stuff like that is possibly happening. Not guaranteed, but most likely is that that there's a burst of ideas coming all of a sudden. And at this session, you also start with your team. Okay, we want to make sure that there's no limitation on what you're thinking. No time limits, no financial limits, no resource limits, not even physical boundaries. Get away from physical boundaries, biological boundaries, natural laws, anything, and let the brain flow. And you come up with stuff in a group that is far beyond what you did in the first brainstorm session. And that is actually the point where you come up with innovative ideas. And then that is the theoretical end. And then in the following week and then the next couple of days, you still ask members, so did you think about it? And people would say, well, I'm totally exhausted, I'm brain dead. I mean, all these terms. And maybe one or the other comes still with something new, and take that something new serious, because their brains continue to work, and the brain has this knowledge of the association in their neural pathways and in their neural networks. And if they still find new ideas, that means there's still room for coming up with something else. So the time limit should not be like, okay, after the 5th day, we simply stop. If that pops, well, still leave it into your session. But it will only come from 1 or 2. It's very rare. It's more than 2 people. But weave it in, and you will come up with probably hundreds of idea snippets, we say. We don't have a better name yet. And these are little fragments of ideas. Well, we could do this with that and that and that. Is it relevant? I don't know yet. Well, if it came up in the session, it is possibly relevant, and therefore, you keep all of these idea snippets serious. And if you're a couple hundred or even 1,000, that may easily be, well, your canvas would be completely filled up. And this is why we have a digital canvas developed, or are in developing right now. We're going beta on August 24, because we know the volume of ideas with a larger team is just amazing. And this is actually what happened when we did our previous companies, and we did never stop like saying, okay, it's enough, now let's go with that. When there was something new, hey, consider it. But it's also interesting to notice that after a week or 2 or probably 3, the new things really ebb down. I mean, it's not coming anymore. So we know this is good. So let's work with what we have. And there's probably, out of 1,000, there's probably 100 idea snippets that you would really consider. And then you compose actually your new picture of the solution, whatever you want to work on, out of hundreds of ideas. And the good thing is, for the whole team, everybody realized, well, there's a little bit of me in there. And the good thing for you as the manager or the composer of this whole thing is you realize, well, there is not one person ever who could come up with all the things. And that is why investors so much push on co-founders and not on solopreneurs, because solopreneurs cannot do this in their brain alone. It's just not possible anymore. Our world has been too complex. So sorry, it was a very long answer. I hope it helped a little bit. But again, it's one of these, again, no key parts of the neuro ideation process, which there's still a lot of learning.
No, I think that definitely covered a lot. And as you said, you'll address more of it next week or next time in our Deep Innovation Design webinar. So we are out of time at the moment. And thank you for everybody who has asked some questions today. And I hope we got to all of them that you wanted. I just want to say thank you, Axel, for your presentation. It was very informative. And as he said, if there's anything that you need, we are here for you. Please join our Facebook groups, or we're LinkedIn, Twitter, follow us, or reach out to us through email. We're happy to answer any of your questions and whatnot. And as we have said, our next episode of the web series will be our Deep Innovation Design webinar, which will be on September 7th. Registration is available on our website, so check it out if you haven't and register. Again, thank you everybody for joining today, and thank you, Axel, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you very much, Elisa. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.